What's up guys, my name is Robin and I make stuff. Today, we're gonna paint a still life. Before you start taking a nap because you just heard the word still life, believe me, I know, I feel the same way. Still life is like snoozeville. This is not just any kind of still life. This is the kind of still life that has been very still. In fact, it's been so still, it's rotting. We're gonna paint rotted fruit. Not like something real boring like what the masters would paint. Nah, screw that. We're gonna paint something really crazy and cool, rotting fruit. Now, if you like this video and you like hanging out with me, I love that for you. I love that for us. We're a great team. Make sure that you like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure that other people out there see this content too. And let's be honest, not everybody out there is painting rotten still life. Just me, I don't know, I haven't seen it before. Let's explore this together. Stop talking about rotten fruit and just get to painting. Now, of course, before I start painting anything, I want to draw a little quick sketch of my rotting fruit on my paper. I'm using a Honda Mule pad. It's a really great way to just do some practice and exercises without having to commit to such a large piece of paper and then feel like it turned out terrible in the end. Nothing turns out terrible, it's just art. Go with it and have a great time. I want to capture the shapes that I have. This is a pear, this looks like an apple, and God knows what that thing used to be. And we are going to loosely draw these on here. I'm not going to be painting the background black. That just seems a little ridiculous. We can mix up some nice colors and put some sort of fun background color in there, maybe some splatters or something like that, right? Just to convey that there is a background. It's not just white paper. White paper can be boring. Oh, I've got this ledge kind of down here along the bottom. These things are going to sit down on top of that. It's hard to see in this, but back beyond there, this whole little shelf continues. So wherever that is, it's going to continue. We have this kind of like pear thing sitting here, got this stem that comes kind of to the middle of the paper. If I look at the edge here and the edge over there, this stem is about in the middle. This spacing here, that spacing there, and this thing is kind of like a teardrop or a triangle shape with that thing going over there. This guy's sitting right in the middle. Right underneath that is its stem. So those are the things that I'm paying attention to. Doesn't mean they're going to be perfect or 100% on point. Now I can also kind of put some ideas in here of this is kind of bruised up in there. Down in this bottom area, this area, this would be great to have some little splatters. We've also got to pay attention to these highlights. And while it's not white, it's very light in comparison. We got a highlight there also. Maybe I'll just kind of draw those areas so I don't forget about them. Your drawing should be a little bit like a blueprint for what you're going to be painting. Get a nice clean palette, kind of like this. This isn't my normal palette, but this is kind of how my palettes look. They look a little messy. That's okay with me. We've got greens, reds, oranges, browns. We don't have any blues. You know, we got green and red. Those are complementary. We've got some oranges. We have a lot of those kind of orangey colors, so maybe a nice blue in the background here. We can do something kind of dark in between and then let it kind of splatter out. Here's some ultramarine blue right here. Do a little bit of wet on wet in the top part of this and then blow on it and just kind of see what happens. Let's do that. It doesn't have to be super dark or anything, just kind of setting the scene. We're going to come back over this in a darker color anyway. I don't need to really focus too hard on making sure these stems are unpainted. We can also lift some color out later if we need to, especially if we're using ultramarine blue. It's pretty easy to lift out. I don't want to go beyond my little shelf that these are sitting on. I haven't really planned this out at all. I'm just jumping in. And I learn something every time from doing that. And that's the great thing about these little pads of paper. All right, just drop your color in there. Look at that. That's freaking amazing. Drop some more, grab some more. Drop that in there. Love that. Love that for us. It's following the water. I don't have to do a lot of work. I'm just letting the watercolor paint itself. One of the hardest parts of watercolor is having the patience to let it do what it's going to do. Too many times I am talking to students and they're like just over here fussing and fussing and fussing and doing something like this. I'm just going to keep moving it around, moving it around, and moving it around, and moving. If you would stop moving it, it would do what it's going to do. This should be kind of loose and fun. Again, just like a little practice. So now I've got some pooling here. Let's just blow on it. And if I tip it, ooh, that's cool. Grab some more blue over here and just dab it in there while it's still wet. It'll make it a little bit darker, especially down in here. This is where it's going to be real dark. Just wanting this watercolor to do most of that work for me and see what happens. While this is dry, let's paint this little shelf area. We will go almost to the edge of this color right here without touching it. If we touch it, it's going to create a bridge of water, and that water is going to pull that paint down into it. And we don't want that. We want to leave a little bit of this edge that you're seeing right here. Let's just do some brown. You know how to get brown, right? Just squirt it out of the tube. Again, leaving that little gap in there. Don't want to touch that to the blue. That looks amazing. I've never seen something so amazing in my life. I got some blue. Blue and brown make gray or black. So I'm going to add a little bit of that to my paper and just kind of see what it does. If we don't let this dry, it's going to connect that water, create a bridge, and then the watercolor is going to go where the water is. We want nice, clean, hard edges in here. This is going to be kind of a chartreuse color, and we'll start with that. And then we'll come back and we'll do another layer of that green, and then we can put some brown in here while it's still wet and let it kind of work its way. I can also do some splatters. That should be fun. For that chartreuse color, I've got this yellow with a little tiny bit of blue mixed into it. And the more water I have, the more lightened up it will be. Let's go ahead and just paint this whole thing, this neon chartreusey color. Wow, that is the most neon pear I think I've ever seen. This will be the highlight color, and it's going to dry lighter than what we see here. That's typically what happens. Don't get too freaked out when you put a color down and you're like, oh my gosh, that's not the color I wanted. While that's drying, we can skip this one because it's wet there, and let's do the undercolor for this one. Whatever the lightest area is on this, I'm going to say it's an apple. Maybe this color in here. Burnt sienna, and the more water it has, the lighter it will be when it hits my paper, because we're going to let that paper show through, and that's what really makes it lighter. So if you ever wonder, how do I get a light brown? Well, add a little bit of water to your brown and put it on there. Just don't overwork it. It's going to go behind this apple. And again, this is just the under. So I grabbed a little bit more of that, and I've got a lot of water on my brush here because I want it to move around. This isn't acrylic paint, so don't forget that. We're working with watercolor. Wow, that is the most neon pear I think I've ever seen in my life. Don't worry, it's going to be fine because we're going to use that color to be the highlight. Start to put maybe some browns. It's like a brownish green. If you don't know what color it is, get a piece of white paper, cut it out to be a square. Single out that color by doing this. What color do we think we have there? Is it brown? Is it green? It's a very light color, green. Lighter than this. Oh, oops. Let's get a little bit of brownish green, something a little less neon than whatever that was. And maybe I'll switch over to yellow ochre over here. And I'm using some Winsor Newton paints. These are not my favorite paints. Let's just mix this up right here. That's kind of a nice, maybe a little bit of brown in there. Burnt sienna. That's looking pretty good. It's a little orangey. Maybe a little more blue for that green. It's like a greenish brown. That looks pretty good. We're just going to come in here like this. Go down to the bottom here. And I'm literally just putting this in here. It's going to go behind this apple, and just kind of doing some little dabs in here. I can kind of smooth those out, getting my brush wet, drying it off, pulling those a little bit so they don't have so much of that texture. And as you're doing that, you got to think about that as being like your palette, right? When you're lifting paint off your palette, you're sucking it up in the brush. Right now there's nothing on my brush, but when I touch this to the paint, it picks it up. So if I'm not cleaning it off, I'm then moving it around the rest of my paper. I keep a paper towel in my hand almost all the time while I'm painting, so I can just quickly lift and move things around if I want to. So it's just creating a little bit of that texture in there, softening it up so we don't have a lot of these hard brush edges. You can see that's kind of coming to life a little bit. Maybe I'll lift some of this out down here. All right, we got that. It's going to pool over there in that corner, but that's kind of coming to life. And then we want to put a little bit over in here. You know, we want to focus on this being this highlight, right? So in order to do that, we got to paint something darker, just a little bit darker around it. Now it's coming together. Wiping off my brush, kind of picking some of that up and creating that highlight in there. I want to do some splatters. Use this paper like this. This is a quick way to do some masking. We're going to use our handy dandy fan brush. Now I cut these so that they look like this. Okay, it's mostly going on my paper. That's not too helpful. Go on there. Okay, there we go. I don't really want it in this center area. So gonna take that out. Now the other thing we can do, still not getting enough splatters, use more of a round brush. We'll try this one and see what happens. Making sure I have enough water on my brush, enough dark color, and we'll just do some taps. Tap, tap, tap. There we go. Tap, 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 tap. This was the winner. The nice part about splattering, you can just literally pick them up. They come right out. And those are gonna dry a little bit lighter. This one's a real tricky one because you got a lot of texture in there. Let's try scraping it. I don't wanna paint all of these little ripples and stuff in here. That sounds awful. Let's just try it. The worst thing that could happen is that it doesn't work. It's gonna squeegee the paint and move it around and kind of start to create some of these lines as well as some of this highlight and this texture. But we gotta lay it on there kind of thick. This could turn out not good. That's okay. Now we want real nice thick paint, kind of that honey consistency. So this is pretty light over in here. I'm gonna put some paint in here. And again, pulling some different colors. We got some purples, oranges would be good in that, browns. Okay, we got some blues. Will this be an epic fail or epic awesome? So I'm just kind of squeegeeing. This paper isn't the best to do this with because it's kind of rippy. I mean, that looks pretty grody. This is just scraping off some of the paper at this point. Look at that. That is taking the paper off. I'm not even pushing that hard. Oh, that's what you get for using this paper, I guess. This looks real terrible. We can also pull some of this color out, and maybe that would have been the thing to do. I'm just experimenting. That's what art should be about. Trying something. Maybe it didn't work the first time, but maybe you learn something and then you think, if I do it like this next time, instead of scraping the whole thing to smithereens, I just scrape a few pieces of it. Got some orange in here, kind of like this burnt sienna color that I've got going on. You don't want to eat that. That's what we're going for. We got some other textures up in here, and maybe we just kind of squiggle those in. Actually try and paint it approach, which I was trying to avoid and see if we could avoid, but it looks like maybe you can't. Definitely looking like something you wouldn't want to eat, and that's kind of the goal here. I'm going to come back now on this pair. We've got some real nice dark colors in here. Let's start putting some blue in the bottom there. And you're probably thinking, blue? What in the heck? Blue is great for shadow. So let's just see. If I just put a lot of this blue right along the bottom, that should send a message that it's much darker down there on the bottom, and it's going to tuck behind this apple. We can also soften that up. Again, just washing off my brush, kind of pulling that around like that. While that is drying, let's start this shiny part right here. And this apple's kind of orange, red, disgusting brown, yellows. So I mix these up. It's kind of a nice orange. Let's just put that in there. Thinking about this as our base layer, you're probably thinking, Robin, this is not what an apple looks like. That's it. I'm so done with your channel. That's fine. Go on then. But if you want to stay till the end and see what happens, better stick around, because I'm not giving up on this still life of rotten fruit. In fact, that needs to go like that, but that's okay because we got that brown thing right there. All right, and then we're gonna have some red. I'm putting this down while it's wet. The highlight in here is not white. It's just not white. Look at it. That is not white. It's like pink. Pink is red, a little more water, less opacity so the paper shows through. Kind of like that. And then it starts to get, red out here somewhere. And up into here, we start getting some blooms in there. Sometimes I kind of like those blooms. This is going to be so dark down here, it's not really going to matter. And this is all rotten up in here. Let's just put some disgusting browns. And I'm letting that kind of flow. Gross, you don't want to eat this. That's what's happening. There's a little highlight right in there where it's rotten. This is going to be good when it dries. It's going to be great. That's rotten right there. So when this dries, this will be a much lighter color. We'll put darker red around that, and then we'll kind of just keep fading this down. We've got some orange right here in this section. This thing looks disgusting. Whatever you do not eat that. Okay, let's work on this thing down here. I'm just going to get some weird brown color that I have, brown gray, and kind of pull that across, skipping a few spots and making sure I leave that gap along the top. We can come back and paint that in a second. These are going to be very dark back in there. Once we start putting those dark values in there, it's really going to come to life, I'm telling you. Some color up in here of this disgusting fruit that's dead and probably has worms on the inside. A little more blue down at the bottom of that pear. Maybe a little more brown in there. It's kind of brown down at the bottom of this pear, but it's also dark. But I think it's fun when you kind of like put the colors together and then see what kind of happens. And we got this up in here, kind of old and moldy. This pear is my favorite one so far. And if you ever are painting and you're like, this looks not as good as I was hoping, stand back and take another look. It's going to be different than what you think. I'm going to put this out here. That might be different than what you think too. I'm going to put this down in here also. It's kind of a purple I just picked up on my palette, but it's working. There's some water there. It created a cool little bloom effect, which is great. So you can see how light this has really dried. So let's put some color now around that. And we can also soften it up a little bit, how we normally do, with our kind of damp dry brush. Smoothing this out in here and kind of picking up some of that paint underneath. Let's mix up some more orange, which is just yellow and red. And this all down here should be blue. Blue is great for shadows. Dabbing it in a little bit to where that wet paint is, because that paint will suck it up and soften it on its own. It looks like that's a highlight, but it's really not. That's what it looks like. I can also use my paper towel. If this is getting too hard of an edge and I don't want to keep lifting that paint up, you want to do something that's got like a little bit of, texture to it and not just like a nicely folded paper towel, because that's going to leave marks in that shape. So you got to think about, what shape do I want this to pick up? So I'm just kind of dabbing in there. There we go. Got this area right there that's kind of got this indented bruise thing on it. I'm going to put the little stem over here. We'll just leave that like that for now. Let's dry that off. Lift a little bit of this color out right here. Getting it wet and dabbing it. Now see how it picked up that color? Getting it wet and dabbing it. So now this is pretty dry. There's a little bit that's still damp in here, but that's just because I totally scratched up that paper. I'm gonna focus on these really dark shapes. So this is a really dark shape, kind of in this here, and it goes behind this apple and then down here and then back like that. And then maybe some of these other kind of dark shapes in here, just to kind of define some of where those wrinkles are. And that's typically how I would do any kind of shadow, is thinking about the shapes. And for a shadow, you can do brown and blue. You want something a little on the cooler side. Come back in here like this, where you're coming down in here like this. And it definitely looks like it's wrinkled. Then I'm going to go on this side over here and put a little more wrinklage in there. I'm just kind of dabbing stuff in. I'm not trying to be too exact. It's kind of like a rock. You just want to convey the idea, what it is that we're trying to get the viewer to see. We want them to think this is some kind of rotten something or other. Wash my brush out, dry it off a little bit, and now I can come and kind of pull some of that just a little, soften some of those little edges so it doesn't look like it's been painted on specifically, and maybe use some of that to some of these wrinkle ideas. The idea of wrinkles. Lighter areas in here. Maybe there's some wrinkles in here that are not black, just more shadowed, but in a different way, like not as dark as these guys. You don't want to overdo it. Make sure you leave some of the whites in there. Maybe there's a couple little areas that are just a tad bit darker. And we can pull out some little highlighted areas as well with this brush and kind of work some of that out. It's a little harder since the paper's so damaged at this point. But that's what I learned. I think I would just come back in and paint it instead of trying to scrape it all. But it was fun trying. I give you permission to do that. Sometimes we need permission in order to feel like we can. Just kind of lifting out a few areas, moving that paint around. It's the nice part about using paints that aren't stains. When you use a staining paint, typically burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, they don't stain too much and they're pretty easy to manipulate after you put them on the paper. Got that highlight going, that's pretty great. Go back to this little round brush. Put some of this in. There's a big bruise right there. And there's a big nasty bruise on the top of this thing. Trying to convey that. Creating some orange with a little bit of red and yellow. Maybe we put a little more yellow in this while it's wet, seeing where they go. It's a nice way to like really blend together what you're working on. This is maybe too much. Let's try that paper towel thing again. Now we're coming up to the very end of this where we're going to put really nice dark shadows in kind of behind these things. We got to make sure they're fully dry in order to do that. Let's mix up some ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. You know this drill. Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. The key to making a dark color is to add complementary colors together. Blue and orange are complementary colors, but you have a little bit of a different characteristic with the burnt sienna, and it makes for a really nice kind of warm, dark, black, whatever color this is, but I love it. I love it. We're gonna go in here and along this edge over here, and right over here I can see a little tiny bit of where this pear is just kind of sitting on the ground. This right here, let's just soften that up. Clean out my brush. All you have to do is really just touch the tip of your brush to the edge of where you painted. You don't need to come all the way down into here and pull it. You just need to start where that is, and then it will find that water and follow it up to where it ends, right? So that should soften itself up that direction a little bit. It might dry faster on this paper, but that's kind of the idea. This is very similar over in here. This should really be black right down in here. This paper doesn't suck up the paint the same way that Arches paper does, so it reacts a little bit different. So I find that I have to kind of dab stuff in versus painting. Otherwise it just lifts the paint out, and I don't really want that. So I gotta dab in there just a little bit more. All right, and then we have this guy down in here, this apple. This really is dark behind this apple. It really is. And it's dark back in here just a little bit. I think the darkest spot is underneath this apple. Again, just kind of dabbing, because painting is wiping the paint away for this paper, and I don't want that. This apple kind of looks like a persimmon. That's okay. That should be shadowed back in there also. It needs to be shadow behind that apple to help show that the apple's in front. And you can see how dark that is behind there, and it's got a little bit of that texture going on. But I want that apple to sit in front. Back in here, I'm just going to kind of mirror what I have going on this side, running it along the edge, giving that water a place to travel to. Putting some darker color in here as well. A little more brown in here where this bruise is. That looks pretty good. A little more brown up in here where this bruise is. A little more brown over here where this bruise is. And then there's some little bruises right in there. Right in this little white area. We're going to put some brown in there. And if I lay my brush on this side, it will kind of do a little bit of dry brushing. This isn't the most textured paper for that, but I really like the pear. This one's okay. This one he looks like he really had a bad day, and I think he did. This would have been better with maybe a little more highlight to it. That looks pretty rotten to me. How do you think it turned out? Does it look even more rotten than before? You can be the judge. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you next time that I make stuff.